my tutees come to speak to me about mental health difficulties that they're experiencing, how I respond really kind of depends on what they're coming to talk about and how they're coming to talk. So sometimes their tutee wants to come and talk to me because they think their mental health is affecting their work, and so then we can talk a little bit more about how it's affecting their work, and I'm really interested in understanding what I can do to help minimise the effect that their mental health is having on their work, or whether there's anything I can do to support them. So I really like it when students come and talk to me about their mental health difficulties, even when they don't think that I can do anything or they don't want me to do anything. Because simply knowing, I think, really helps our relationship between a tutor and a student, because I can be there to help them without doing anything explicit, just by asking them how things are going that day, or just knowing as I'm helping them through tutorials. If a student comes to talk to me about mental health difficulties and we want to explore avenues of what we can do next, sometimes we don't want to do anything. Sometimes the student just wants me to know, and we talk about it and we think about how between ourselves I can support the student. Sometimes we can have a look at whether the university can provide more support in terms of academic matters. So we might be able to get some support through the disability service at the university, who might be able to provide a mentor or support along those lines to help the student manage their academic work. I'll also often refer students to the counselling service, who are able to see any student experiencing distress, whether that's a mental health diagnosis or not. I'm keen to encourage my students to go and see their GP. Most GPs on university campuses do understand student issues and are there to support students. Universities have different policies around confidentiality and the amount of confidentiality that a tutor can afford you as a student. If you're worried about this, it may be helpful to ask your tutor, before disclosing information to them, what they would have to do if, in a given circumstance, a student disclosed X, whatever X might be. So speaking to a tutor for the first time about difficulties, you might find it helpful to have written down a few notes about what you want to say. You might also find it helpful to drop them an email before the meeting to let them know what you want to talk to them about, so that they can prepare in their own minds how they're going to respond in this session that they have with you. You might also want to come with a few ideas of how they specifically can help. If a tutor is really unsure about how to support students with mental health difficulties, they might be nervous about what they could possibly do. So coming with suggestions of how you think they as a tutor could be helpful might make your conversation easier. I think if you're struggling as a student, it's really important to tell your tutor as early as possible, because sometimes issues around mitigating circumstances can take time to put into place. And sometimes if you disclose only really at the last minute, the tutor might be surprised and not know that you were struggling beforehand, and thus might have a less proactive response to your problems around the assignment that you're trying to work on. So always disclosing things early is helpful. I often hear from students that they're nervous about going to speak to a tutor about mental health difficulties that they're experiencing. Sometimes they're concerned that the tutor won't react in the way that they expect, or perhaps won't be understanding. What I'd suggest is to remember that the tutor's nervous as well. It's always a bit of a shock when a student discloses difficulties to you, especially if you thought you knew how well the student was doing. In my experience as a tutor, I've generally found that students' mental health difficulties get better after they've spoken about them. So for many students, they've been bottling up problems that they've been experiencing for a while, and as we start talking about them, they seem to ebb away and seem less difficult to manage. So I'd really encourage you to start talking, because talking really does help.